accumulate $30,000 for a child for college, it's important that you're shopping for college with those dollars in mind.
And so fast forward in. So let's say you overexert yourself. You got children in college. You fund too much college. And now we're getting to 60. What does that look like?
That's a great question. It usually looks like not being able to stop working.
About parents not risking their retirement for the sake of their children. And so that shows up in different ways. And we've had conversations with some of our clients about this. Just a good topic to discuss and talk through and think through. So yeah, diving into today, I will pose just open-ended. What do you see from your experience is the most common mistakes you would say parents make when trying to assist their children? What would you say is the most common mistake? Yeah.
Most common. There's a few, and I think it has to do with the stage that the kids are in. They all come around setting boundaries. So I find that parents have trouble setting boundaries for what they are willing and unwilling to pay for their kids. And a lot of times it comes from a really good place, right? I want my kids to have what I didn't have. I want them to experience what I didn't experience. For, folks that came from a certain socioeconomic path, maybe they grew up poor, or they grew up just okay, or they didn't really get all the things they wanted. It's a desire of theirs to give all those things to their kids. And those things can be costly, right? They can be the clothes and the trips and a car when they're 16 and, access to schools they couldn't go to. So all those things make sense and they come from a good place. A lot of times I find that our clients or that folks in general don't really know how to figure out if they can afford to do it. And what we really want to talk about is how do we make sure that we can afford to help in some of these areas? What does the plan need to look like? What do the contingencies need to look like? And then also being able to communicate that to the kids, right? So on the front end, like early, it's really about services, clothes, right? It could be, hey, we go school shopping, we buy a lot of clothes, or I want to make sure that our kids experience international travel. So, we're going to these destinations with our kids specifically, or activities that are really expensive, right? So those are some things that when you add them up, kids can be costing more than they should relative to your income. So we want to make sure that in your cash flow that you can afford it and that you can know when you can say yes or when you can say no. So that could be having a fund set aside for kid activities, right? If there's a certain amount of money that we're setting aside each month that we're doing kid activities with, whether that be tutoring or dance or piano or museums or trips for them, that it's coming out of that amount. And we are also already saving for retirement, having our emergency fund, doing all the things we need to do. And these are the other dollars. So that's the first part is, not having boundaries and not having funds set aside for the kids, and everything's kind of commingled. So that would be the first big mistake I see is for folks.
And so setting boundaries, having money set aside, knowing how much you can spend, one. Knowing your spending,
Yep.
and setting money aside. Are there any other around setting boundaries? Any other tips?
Yeah. It really comes. So we're big fans of 529 account. So a 529 account is an account set aside for education for a kid, right? That recently you can actually use it for grade school, middle school, high school tuition. So, whether that's charter or private or whatever, you can use those. But they were originally for higher education, college, even grad school, other continued education. So the earlier you start putting dollars there, the more time it has to grow tax-free. So we really like when a child is born, one of the first few years of a child being on this earth, that we set aside an account, we open up a 529 account, and we start putting money in there on a monthly basis, even if it's small, $50, $100 a month goes a long way, long term. We also like to encourage our parents to use birthdays and holidays as a way of getting the family to contribute to those accounts. So, having a conversation with your aunt or your mom or your sister, in lieu of buying clothes that are going to not fit again in 6 months, or toys that they're going to outgrow in 9 months, can you take $100, $200 you were going to spend on those things and put it in their college fund? Here's the number. Here's how you do it. Here's the link online. That can be really, really powerful. It can also be challenging for family members who want to give gifts, right? If they're gift giving relatives, they're like, no, I want to give them this outfit I saw, right? And so you really have to coach family members. But if you can all get together rowing in the same direction, it can be really powerful to accumulate the money in the 529. But it's also important that you keep education in that realm of how much money you have, right? So if you accumulate $30,000 for a child for college, it's important that you're shopping for college with those dollars in mind, right? We shop for a college, and we need to shop with a budget. And that budget should have to do with how much you save and how much you can also maybe afford in cash flow while they're in school for helping to pay tuition. But what shouldn't happen is letting a 17-year-old shop without a budget for colleges, right? Wherever you get into, we'll figure it out. A lot of times folks just can't afford to do that. There are very, very few people that can figure out Princeton, right? Unless there's significant savings or unless there's really scholarshiping involved. So we need to be making college decisions from a financial standpoint with a budget in mind, just like we shop for a house, just like we shop for any other large purchase. And so our kids can be involved in that discussion. It's their future, but dollars are important as well. And that goes into my final part about education mistakes that we see is Parent Plus loans can be really, really detrimental. So what a Parent Plus loan is, let's say they get into Princeton, you have some $529, they need to go borrow for school for the rest of the tuition. And they might take some loans out in their own name, but then you might take some loans out in your name for them for college. And that can be really tough, right? You end up with that debt as a parent, paying that when they're finished with school. If they get a waiver, if they're doing public service loan forgiveness because they go into a nonprofit, if they become a doctor and they're working for a healthcare system and they can get the money waived, those loans don't count because those are your loans, not theirs. So a lot of times we're seeing parents paying for their kids' tuition into their 60s and 70s on the loan that the kids have been out of school for 10, 20 years and you're still paying their loan. And there are no government assistance. There are no education assistance programs built for parents who take out loans for their kids. So we really highly advise against Parent Plus loans. If the money you save and the money they can borrow come together and it's not enough for the tuition, that means that we can't afford that school.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so thinking through setting boundaries and not wanting to take out certain loans and just understanding how all of it works together.
Yeah.
If you have, we'll go in different phases. And I'll start with the phase of someone with a newborn.
Yep.
Good morning, Kasha. If you have someone that is trying to plan for school with a newborn, right? They're fresh into it.
Yep.
Where would you encourage them to start?
Yes. So we encourage them to start with a 529 account. And if we are saving, so we advise our clients to get, or we're working towards getting to saving 20% of their income, right? So if somebody's making $100,000, we are wanting you to save $20,000 a year. Now that can be a lot for some. We have folks we work with who in 30s. We have some folks who are starting at 5 and we're working our way up, but 20% savings. And that 20% savings, by and large, is what it will take for you to have enough set aside for you when you get to retirement age. And then that's 10% of it is that. The other 10% are things before retirement age. And inside of that other 10%, we include 529 accounts. Money we're saving for education or money we're saving for the child. So there are instances where based on your circumstances, we'll say, okay, instead of putting 10% to your 401k, we can put 7% to your 401k after you had the child. Take the difference of that money and put it into a 529. Or Instead of us saving $1,000 a month into this investment account, we can do 700 into this investment account and then 300 into this 529. So usually we're finding the money from other savings buckets and funneling it into a new account for the kids. And we want to start that as early as possible. And we like 529 accounts because all the money that grows is tax-free, mostly tax-free, right? Without penalty. So that's our thing. Start early. Like, let's get it set up. A lot of times we're trying to do that within the first 6 months of the child being born. Let's set that up. Let's start putting money in that account and let's start saving it long-term for them, because chances are they're going to need the money for education. So that's the first thing, is early and as often. And it can be as small as $20, $25 a month, $20, $25 per paycheck, but let's start accumulating those dollars for their education.
Where would you encourage someone to start if they are, I'll say 7 years in? They got a 7-year-old. We're thinking about 10 years until they're off. Where would you encourage them to start? Same
thing. We got 10 years. Let's put money in. Let's be realistic about what we can. Knowing that we are 7 years in, $25 is a start, but we'd really like to probably get into the hundreds on a monthly basis, just because of what we know college will cost. So if we're getting up to $250 a month for a 7-year-old, that means that we got $3,000 for 10 years. That's about $30,000 of contributions that we can do for them, plus some growth. Maybe we're up to 40 grand when they get there. And for a 4-year education, having $10,000 per year is a significant amount of a base to start with when we're shopping for college.
From the perspective of, we got a high schooler, right?
Yes.
And that's 13. We're thinking we got 4 years.
Yep.
Also considering, where would you start? Where would you encourage them to start?
Yeah, once we get into the teens, once they're in high school, 529 accounts aren't very effective. And the reason is there's so few years for the growth. So the growth is tax-free. That means that we need to have the time for the growth before we need to start pulling the money. Once we're a 9th grader, 10th grader, 529 accounts aren't the best way to do it. And also we're 3 years from using the money, which means that we don't recommend that you put money in the stock market when we have that short of a window. We really like 3 or plus. So we're really talking about saving money into cash. We're talking about savings accounts, setting aside money. We still want to start putting money aside for them, but we're typically not going to invest those dollars because we would be putting them at risk. We can still set up a 529 account if it helps to just see the money set aside for education, but we're usually going to choose a lot safer investments. A lot of people can be inclined to take more risk because you need it quicker and you want it to grow more. So they swing for the fences when you have a 13-year-old, but actually that's when we need to be taking less risk because we need the money in 3 to 4 years. So inside of the 529, we might be doing cash and bonds as the primary portfolio mix and not using a lot of stock in the portfolio. So we might be looking at, yes, we can still use 529s. We can also just use savings accounts. But we need to know that if we have no dollars set aside for them, then we really need to get active on how we go about shopping schools and how we go about finding money to pay for the schools, whether that's applying for scholarships or grants or activities and things like that.
Okay. Anything else you want to add there from the parents trying to save for college through the lens of not hurting their retirement?
Yeah. So that's all before college, right? That's kids. We know with inflation now that folks are providing for their children into their early to mid 20s, sometimes late 20s these days. And so we talk about those boundaries, right? When they're in school, we're talking room, we're talking board, we're talking books. There's other expenses that pop up, spending money, car insurance, phone bills, right? So just making sure that we're mindful of what we can afford to help them with still. I just had a really good conversation with somebody over dinner about after college, right? So she had a 22-year-old son living at home, thinking about how do I support him so that he is empowered to start his journey as a young adult without enabling him. And like, what does that look like? And so we talked about, if he's living at home, charging a reduced rent, right? A one bedroom I'm in Charlotte. A one bedroom in Charlotte might be $750. You're living at home with me. I'm going to charge you $350, but you need to pay me rent, right? Or I can supplement your phone bill. I can supplement your car insurance. I'll pay the car insurance if you pay the car note. Those type of things where you give them a leg up without giving them a handout can be really helpful. And then it's really about communicating how long those supplements will last, right? So I'm okay helping you with rent, or I'm okay you living here. It takes time to build a career. 3 years is the maximum. You're 22, but at age 25, right, you're going to have to find your own space. You're going to have to figure out how you can pay for your full life by age 26. So those type of conversations, and then helping them to get on track. How do they budget? How do they save? Are really, really important when they're in their young or early 20s, so that they can get off to a really good start. And it's important that you give them that landing space so that they're not going straight from school, overextending themselves, because we see that a lot when I talk to folks who are in their 24, 25, 26. They wanted to be independent so quickly. They didn't have a job that could really supplement their lifestyle or where they are choosing to be. And so they're going into debt. And they're not saving any money. And so parent help is important, but there has to be some boundary setting so that you're not spending all of your hard-earned money giving them a cushion, but you don't have a cushion on the back end for retirement.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's a challenge. You don't want to overexert yourself. You don't want them to overexert themselves. You don't want to enable them. I mean, it's complex.
It is. And there's some signs, though. These are the big signs, right? If you're not contributing to your retirement account up to the match, or if you're not able to leave your retirement account alone without tapping into it, you can't afford to help. If you're carrying credit card balances month to month, you can't afford to help, right? So I would say those are the big three. If you're not contributing to retirement, if the dollars aren't staying in retirement accounts, if you're pulling and paying penalty for things, or if you're carrying credit card balances that are right now at 30% interest, it's too expensive for you to help. So those are some signs that if you're helping other people and you are not contributing to retirement and you're not paying off your credit cards month to month, or you have to live on credit cards, or if you find yourself doing any quick advances or payday or any of those things, payday loans, any of those things, you can't help. You don't have it. So.
And so fast forward in. So let's say you overexert yourself. How old let's say you're 40, 35 to 40. You overexert yourself. You got children in college. You fund too much college. They come out of college. You fund them too long past that phase. And now we're getting to 60, 55, 60. What does that look like?
It's a great question. It usually looks like not being able to stop working. It typically looks like when we run retirement plans for folks in that space, Social Security is $2,000 a month, and your lifestyle's $5,000 to $6,000 a month, and we've got maybe $50,000 to $100,000 saved, and like the math just doesn't add up, and so we end up having to work a lot longer, and those conversations are hard. And so, yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid. I'm glad you asked it. Those are tough, painful conversations. I've been working 40 years. I'd like to stop. I've taken care of everybody else except for me. And I don't have enough money to stop working. And I don't really want to rely on my children to take care of me. And that can be where it ends up. You've taken care of them for so long. Now they have to take care of you or supplement you financially. So hopefully they're doing well and hopefully they're willing. But most of our clients who are getting in there in that space don't want to be a burden to their kids. So it leaves us with a lot more limited options. On the contrary, if you do it the other way and you have extra money, right? So we do have clients, and we do have clients who are the kids, right? We have clients who are the kids who spent their 20s and 30s. They borrowed for college or they worked their way through college, but they had some student loan debt and their parents didn't pay for it out of pocket. They saved their own money. They put money in their retirement accounts. They saved and earned. And then when the kids were 25, 30 years old with that debt, their parents could afford to pay the debt off for them, or to assume that loan and just say, hey, Sally Mae's charging you 7%. I'll give you the $40,000 that you owe as a loan, and you pay me back over the next 10 years with no interest, right? So if you don't help as much and you secure your own mask, like they say in the airplane, then you can actually help in the future, right? You can continue to supplement a little bit longer if you'd like to. You can pay off their student loan debt. You can give them loans for certain things. You can help them buy their first home if you need to with gift dollars. And we see a lot of that. But usually when we see a parent helping one of our clients, they paid for their own school. They've been paying for their lifestyle for the most part. And the parents get to the end of the road in their 60s, close to retirement, and say, I've done my financial plan and now I have extra. And here's the way I'm going to use this extra to help you so that you can get out of debt and start your wealth building journey. But the other way around, if you get to retirement and you don't have extra, let alone you don't have enough, it puts a huge burden on your children to then supplement your lifestyle. And it really, really hurts their financial future anyway. So securing yourself and securing your future is really tough to do with the people that you love, but it's really, really important for you and for them.
Yeah. I think it's important for, as a segue to our next conversation.
Yeah.
Around when we're in our 30s and 40s and maybe early 50s, not risking our retirement for the sake of taking care of our parents.
Yeah.
And so what we'll be talking about next week is that fine line. And also just being aware that if you are taking care of your children now in a way that hurts your retirement and you're 30 and 40, right? Then you could potentially be in a position when you're 60 and you want to retire and you can't afford it, and your children are like, I want my parents to retire. They did everything for me, right? And the shoe's on the other foot. So those conversations go hand in hand, which is why we'll bring that back next week. But before then, we have they're not questions, they're statements. We have a statement that we'll present. And these statements are money script assessment statements. So for our clients, we use a money scripts assessment that helps us and our clients become more aware of scripts around money. Last week, we presented the statement, I do not deserve a lot of money when others have less money than me. So if you're curious how we answer that, check that video. But for today, the statement is rich people are greedy. And we'll answer from a strongly disagree all the way up to a strongly agree. Rich people are greedy.
Who's first?
That's fair. I'll go first. Rich people are greedy. I disagree. So that's a 2 out of a 6. I disagree because, and I don't strongly disagree because there are some rich people that I feel are greedy, but there are also some rich people that I don't feel are greedy. And it just depends on who the rich person is in your brain when you're thinking about rich people being greedy. What about for you?
Yeah, I know greedy rich people and I know generous rich people. So mine would be disagree as well. I don't strongly disagree because I think that greed is a personal trait. I think there are some poor people who are greedy. I've always been of the idea that the accumulation of money and power exposes character. It doesn't change character. So people who are generous with few are typically generous with more, and people who are stingy with few are typically stingy with more as well. So I disagree that rich people are greedy. I'm mainly because I disagree that rich people have cornered the greedy market. Like I think greed is one of the 7 deadly sins, right? Like I think that greed shows up in $200 contracts with people and $200 million contracts with people. So I think it's, yeah, I disagree.
And that's this. I like these. So we have our clients do it, which is one reason I like it. But two, just if our clients want to know what we think about these, because in our conversations with our clients about these, we do not share. We may slip one or two and say, yeah, okay, yeah, but we don't share, so they don't know. So yeah, touche. I wonder what Kasha thinks about rich people being greedy, because she's well on her way. Not just saying. But also, it's important. One thing we usually discuss with our clients is who are you considering rich when you're thinking through this question, right?
Great.
If you make 25,000 a year, the rich people you're considering may be 100,000 income.
Mm-hmm.
If you make 100,000 income, the rich person might be 500K, right? So it's everybody's perception of rich is different. I mean, there's a lot of different nuances to this question and all of the questions specifically related to the money scripts. So just good things to think about.
What is rich?
Go ahead.
That's a great point, Brett. What is rich?
Yeah.
And so, what when you think of rich, do you think of Jeff Bezos? But other people, when they think of rich, they might think of you. I remember being growing up, and people were like, "Man, y'all rich." We lived in Bond Hill at the time. We had a nice house. It was big. It was old, but it was a big house. And I had friends that would come over and be like, "Man, that y'all rich." And then my dad was coaching in Wyoming, Ohio at the time, which we ended up going to. And we would go there, and I would be like, "Man, y'all rich, right?" And then I would meet those kids. They're like, "I'm not rich. Like, have you been to Indian Hill? They rich." Right? So it's just interesting when people think about what is rich. And it all comes down to, we talked about this before, but when it comes to your financial satisfaction, like your comparison points really matter. So when you compare yourself to your peers, whoever your peers are, your neighbors, how you think you're doing in relation to them can cause you to judge how you're doing professionally, financially, socially, differently if you compare yourself to different people. So what is rich? That's a good question. That's our question for you to answer in the future. What do you consider rich?
What do you consider rich? Perfect. Kasha's in alignment. That's great to hear. Great minds think alike. So for next week, we will be talking through not risking your retirement for the sake of aging parents. So not risking your retirement for the sake of your aging parents, right? We'll pose another question around money scripts. And we'll be back next week at 10 on Monday. Also wanna mention we will be on YouTube starting today. So we'll drop a link there for those to subscribe. We'll start posting some videos at the very least once a week. You'll see some of these discussions there. We'll chop them up and get them posted there. So feel free to find us there and subscribe and engage there also.
Absolutely. What is it Alchemist Wealth?
The handle is Alchemist Wealth. It's tricky to find, probably because we don't have much there yet, but try really hard to find this and you'll do it. Don't let them loaded.
We'll get them loaded. They'll pop up, keywords and all.
So, but yeah, good discussion today.
No, we do have an article that we wrote about this topic. So we'll put that we'll link that in this description or in the comments so you can read the article that we posted last week about helping kids without risking your retirement.
Yep.
So that's all. See you next week.
Until next time.
All right. Peace.